of all, hi everybody, and thanks for coming to the session. In this session, our objective today is to demonstrate that online learning courses can be as effective as a face-to-face class. Me and Jen worked together for about 3 years almost. Okay, since I came to Rutgers, I started working with her, redesigning the elementary Italian courses at Rutgers, courses online. And that was what we tried to do. We tried to make online learning as good as as close as to face-to-face as possible. We also want to illustrate how the use of multimedia learning can improve an online course and explain why the students respond well to the multimedia approach, and explain how effective digital storytelling can improve content delivery and student learning. Students learn better when they see and they hear things, and that's what we want to demonstrate today. I'm going to start with talking about the problem with the status quo of online teaching and learning from the teacher point of view, obviously. One of the problems I found with online teaching is that many instructors forget or ignore the collaborative aspect of online learning. There is still a good amount of people who believe that to teach an online courses, you simply transfer what you have on the face-to-face, put it online, have your lecture, have your documents, and that's it, which is not exactly what online learning means. So the professor becomes just someone who's there to assist, to correct homework, and maybe give some feedback, because it happens, and that's one of the complaints students have, that professors don't give feedback or timely feedback. So virtual, there is no students' involvement and participation, and this is a problem, especially when dealing with teaching a language online. Language is learned by participation, by practicing your vocabulary, hearing the language, interacting with your friends, with your classmate and your instructor. So if that's missing, obviously, I believe also learning is missing at the end. So with the help of Jen, we worked on that problem and hopefully found a good solution. So why is this wrong? It is wrong because, as I just said, learning a language doesn't happen by simply reading a textbook. And many of the textbooks out there, I mean, I'm talking especially for Italian, given the fact that's what I teach, are not really providing the right material at the right pace. So there's a problem with textbook out there. But even reading a textbook doesn't teach you a language. Listening to a recording doesn't teach you a language, or at least doesn't teach everything about a language. Things that you need to know, such as culture, such as the differences between words that can be perceived as being the same, but they're not. And also, if students are not having fun, they probably won't engage in the language. So in order to learn, student needs to be involved and active collaborate with classmate and instructor, which is easy to do on a face-to-face class, obviously. We have group work, we have all the techniques on a face-to-face. It's a little harder on the online classes, but it's still possible. And they need to feel that you're there. Like, you can't just be hiding behind a screen, and so you need to establish your presence. And I, for example, had to learn how to deal with the idea of video because I was video shy, but then I learned that you need to do that too, so the students can see that you are a person somewhere. So how we do all this? What did we learn over the 3 years working together? What we did, we created together a pre-recorded lecture that could deliver the course content. What I did was, before even the course was ready to run, we made short videos. I use Voicethread, sometimes I use Cultura, but the point was that it was short, the video, and it was focused on the topic that I wanted to teach. And sometimes I was on video, sometimes I was not, but even if it was just my voice, I made sure that my voice conveyed the feelings, the situation I was trying to explain. And I was also, during the video, trying to answer all the questions the students might have. I've been teaching for a long time, so I know that some topics might raise some questions, so I try to answer them before they weren't even asked. And as I say, the lectures were reduced to 4 minutes, not more than that, because the attention span of our students today is very short, so I broke it down in segments that they could absorb. And the advantage of this, they can go back and listen to the lecture anytime they want. We develop classroom activities that promote active learning, and I'm going to describe some of them. I was there to guide and encourage the students' active learning by creating, even online, a student-centered environment. Understanding that I don't own the language. I'm there to share with my students in a way that can be they can give them easy access. And I interacted with class via forum, via blog, via video, by answering, posting video comments to their homework. So try to be there as much as possible. Via email also, and I also had with them online chat and online office hours. And usually the students responded pretty well to the online office hours, so there was a good turnout. How do we promote group work? We designed many activities and that would ask students to work in group. You can assign students to work in random groups, or you can choose the groups. I usually have small classes online. I mean, Italian doesn't get like 60, 70 students in online class, so I group the students and they each assigned, you can assign them a color, or you can assign them just a name. And so they have to collaborate among themselves. You can create games, and the first that finished the game receives a prize. The kind of game you can create is organize, I call it a puzzle, a reading that you have broken down and they have to reorganize from the beginning to the end. You give them a time, you can create this time activity online, and the students, the group that finished before, gets a prize. Now the prize, when I'm teaching face-to-face, is chocolate or whatever. Online, it becomes an extra point on your quiz, or an extra point on your final, or maybe it just becomes a star next to your name. It's hard to deliver goodies to when they're not present, but it's a way to motivate them and keep them engaged. You'd have to provide resources, and even though we do provide resources in a face-to-face class, I feel that online you have to be even more specific, so your guidelines have to be really clear about what you want them to achieve, how you want them to get there, and have rubrics. Rubrics work wonder, especially when you're teaching online. And then I always, after the group work is done, I like to have the students share their work and have a peer review feedback. So the students can look at each other's work and say, oh, maybe I could have done that. Oh, I like the way you did this. Or, oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to try that next time. Obviously, I always make a disclaimer. Every comment has to be respectful, because I don't want anyone to get out of hand and offend anyone in the class. Also, encourage discussion among the group members. To make sure that everybody participates, again, I give some sort of encouragement. If you participate 2 or more times, you get maybe, again, that extra point, or you get maybe a homework pass, which is always welcomed as a reward. If you don't have to do one exercise, it's good for the students. So try to encourage them as much as possible. Keep them interested and keep them involved. One good thing is to incorporate task-based activities. Basically, what I did in my one-on-one class recently was to give them a map of the city of Rome and put them in the station, and then ask them to write a dialogue where they're going to ask direction to get to the Colosseum. They are at the terminus station, they have to go to the Colosseum. How would you get there? So they have to kind of create real-life questions and hopefully get the direction to get to the Colosseum. This can be done. I usually do it orally. I have them record a voice thread where I activate the moderation so that the next students cannot hear what's being said, because otherwise it ends up that the first student does the homework and everybody else just repeats what the other students has done. So the first stage of the project usually is like they have the moderation on so no one can hear. But then at the end, I take the moderation off so everybody can share and see who got there better, because you'd be surprised how many ways there are to get, the students find to get to a place when there's maybe one straight line. I'm not the one to talk because I'm bad with direction, but at least students can also work in groups, that's obviously. And then one thing I do allow with the students, it takes a lot of my time, but I'm doing it this semester more than other semester, and I'm seeing a lot of the advantages to it, is to have synchronous meetings. Sometimes Skype, sometimes the chat, sometimes we do Zoom chat. It works to see them in groups, because what I do, I create conversation homework like I would do in a class, and I'm just there as the moderator, and it gives them an opportunity to really talk and really experiment with the language, because when they do record their own messages, it's never as natural as when you speak when you're on the spot. So I find this very useful. I'm using it this semester, and it's giving me great result. Most importantly, we did use multimedia and multimedia resources, and I'm going to leave that to Jen.
Thank you. So out of curiosity, how many of you are language instructors? Okay, just one. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure it's, I think, blatantly aware you can use these same strategies in any course, right? And when Carmela first approached me, she basically said, I want to revamp 101 to 132, so the entire program, and I don't want to use a textbook. I was like, oh, this is my kind of girl. So we had to figure out a way to overcome the obstacles that we were well aware of in online asynchronous learning in a way that was engaging. And one of the ideas that we decided to go with was to create videos. Now, we'll show you examples of the videos later on, but we started to notice that we were going to rely pretty heavily on multimedia learning. And when I started looking at the research, it's fairly new, but if you went to the keynote, how many of you went to the keynote this morning? Okay, what he said. You know, the Gen Zers are coming up and they're very visual. Why are they visual? Because of all these apps that they're on. The social media is all about that quick visual informational piece of what I'm eating, where I'm eating, who I'm with kind of thing. And so we're going to be relying more and more on this multimedia approach. Mayer over at UC Santa Barbara, he came up with this theory. And basically what it boils down to is people learn better when you're putting together the same information in both textual and a visual representation. Now, the visual representation doesn't have to be a high-end studio quality video. It could be an infograph. It could be just images that will evoke or point to or alliterate to the content that you're talking about. It could be any number of visual cues. And the more that you mix them up, the better it is. So multimedia learning at Rutgers, we're lucky here at Rutgers because we have multiple tools that are freely available to faculty and staff to create their content. One example here I have is of Powtoon. Everybody has access to Powtoon if you're using the Canvas LMS. I couldn't find an example of an educational Powtoon on their website, so I'm going to play this one, which is about customer service. And unfortunately, it told me that all the speakers are lent out, so I don't know how good the audio is going to be on this particular one. Now, how many of you have seen something like this in a commercial, right? A lot of the companies lately are, and actually on the company's website, there are a lot of the big names in commercial, products that are using Powtoon to create these very short snippets of information. Now, this one's 1:20, which I think is even a little too long, but Powtoon is really great for conveying concepts where the action is important. So for example, I don't know, do we have any science or engineering people in the room? A process? All right, let's go back to high school biology. Do y'all remember photosynthesis and the circle, step 1, step 2, step 3? Sometimes when you're teaching something like that online, actually seeing the professor doing something, you're seeing that motion really conveys or impacts the learning a little bit better than just having a static image on the presentation. Okay, you can say this about systems, about sciences, about engineering, or products, for example, like this, customer satisfaction, just any kind of process. So sometimes using something like Powtoon can be really effective to drive that point home. I work with a couple of faculty members that use that as an introduction to certain modules or weeks, and I always say make it really short. You're not there to do a laundry list of how to do something. One of the professors wanted to use it to compare, oh gosh, she's gonna hate me if I get this wrong. It was comparing the revolutions in Haiti and I believe Grenada, I think were the two countries that she was highlighting. And so being able to put up maps of where these countries are, who the leaders were of the revolution and what the outcomes were, that was much more impactful to her students, or it would have been had she completed it, than just having the static map up there with some text off to the side or in a PowerPoint format. Now, why didn't she complete it? Because Powtoon is a black hole if you are a perfectionist. It gives you a lot of options. You want to play with every single action you saw on there was manually made, just like making a PowerPoint. So for me to bring in that, clapboard, or for the two people to show up and the expressions on their face, you go to add a person in Powtoon and it asks you from a list of like 12 different expressions what you want the person to look like. So you can spend hours on a simple 1-minute Powtoon, but it is very effective. Where am I pointing? No? Not working? Hello? Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So this Powtoon, can you like just Google Powtoon?
If you go to the Canvas LMS, you are able to create, or if you go to, Rutgers Media Space, right? It's mediaspace.rutgers.edu. And when you log in, you're able to add a Powtoon. Okay.
But if I wanted to do this outside of Rutgers?
I believe they have like a 30-day trial period.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a software?
It is a software
Okay.
that Rutgers has purchased for faculty and staff, which is great because otherwise you just get a 30-day trial and that's it. I think what happened is that my PowerPoint stopped. So let's go back. Okay. So the next piece of technology that is openly available to all of you is Voicethread. Have any of you ever used Voicethread? Yep. All right, so Voicethread is really cool as well. And Voicethread allows for multimedia collaboration between the professor and the student, or student to student. That's something that some of the other products that Rutgers offers doesn't allow you to do. So here is a snippet of one of the instructional designers over at TLT, and I'm going to fast forward this a little bit.
Hello everyone, this is a critique of 5 sample credit discussion rubrics.
So this is a critique of rubrics, and what Priscilla did here was record her webcam and her voice, and you can see that she's able to doodle on the actual document. Now this could be a PowerPoint document. You could do a narrated voiceover of a PowerPoint in Voicethread. For the most part though, let me pause this. The cool thing is, if I had an image of a photograph, and I'm teaching Photography 101, and I threw up a picture of, and I have this, a kitten playing with a ball of yarn. I can go ahead and make an introductory statement about the use of light in this photo, and then ask a question for the students. The students can then, as you see Priscilla's bubble here, they can add their own comments here in the form of text, voice, webcam. They can add an additional slide. They can add a web resource. So there are multiple ways of representation of their participation. So they're not just reduced to text. They don't have to show their face if they're camera shy, like my friend here. They can just do an audio recording. And in the case of language learning, this is extremely powerful because before or without using Voicethread, you were limited to just text response. And that's one of the obstacles that Carmela struggled with a lot. Was she was very insistent on, I need to hear them speak. They need to hear each other speak. This is an online language course. And so Voicethread really became the go-to for that because it allowed her to represent her native speak, but also for the students to interact with each other, hearing each other as they would as if they were in a physical classroom. Did you want to add something? Oh, okay. I saw you coming this way. Okay. So Voicethread, you're all able to use it as well. Now the last, what do I keep doing? Play. No, not play. The last technology there, Kaltura Capture Space, is actually what we use to upload the videos that were professionally made for the Italian program. So I'll show you an example of that later on. But again, Kaltura Capture Space, it's available to all faculty, staff, and students through their LMS. All right. So as I mentioned before, Carmela approached me and said, I want to revamp the entire language program from top to bottom, which was a great opportunity because as an instructional designer, geek, and nerd, I was like, yes, we can do alignment. And I know Dina's going to appreciate that. So basically, we wanted to make sure that all of her learning outcomes were aligned top to bottom, and that 132 was not completely off the mark based on what they learned in 101. So everything was kind of cohesive going up the ladder. So she wanted to move toward independence from the textbook. She said that the textbooks were terrible at teaching languages. Has anyone ever tried to learn a language off a textbook? Nobody? Come on, raise your hand if you learned. Okay, there you go. I knew it. And what happens? You feel so isolated. And has anyone ever, because it happened to me, I was learning Arabic. And I started talking to someone, you know, getting out of my shell, and they said, that's not how you say that. We don't use that. It's like old way of speaking. And I felt so embarrassed. So a lot of these textbooks are out of date. They're not the authentic language that people use in every day. So if I was studying to travel, well, it was useless now because I was going to sound like an old fuddy-duddy from back in the day. She wanted to make sure everything was student-centered, that we incorporated active learning. She wanted to teach language in a more natural way, and she wanted to use authentic examples of how people speak the language.
Oh, okay, so about the textbook, my problem with the textbook is that even though today they're working a lot on introducing technology, introducing voice, is that when you hear the recorded dialogue, they're never as real as Italian people speaking. For example, we speak fast in Italy, and I usually speak fast, she knows. I'm actually trying to slow down here. So when I hear the dialogue, I'm like, that's not how we do it. And the students get used to that slow mode speaking. Then they go in Italy and they can't catch a word because the Italians speak fast. So that's one of the problems. I try to introduce them to a more natural pace of language speaking, and also to words that we use now that the textbook doesn't update. Languages company, young people are introducing words that I'm learning because I don't know. I mean, I go in Italy and I hear words, I'm like, really, that's a word now? So I try to incorporate all that into my teaching. So what we did, we added obviously Voicethread used in a variety of ways, like Jen already said, videos, whatever, and I got over my shy. Thanks to Joe in the back, I took a video production class. It kind of forced me to get over the shy part. So
a little shout out, TLT does these little workshops, right? So video production is one of them.
It was a good course, not because it's here. I learned how to act on camera. That was a big thing for me. So we added forums and blogs. I use forum mostly in 101, obviously not the first week because they don't have any Italian, but starting after the first chapter, maybe in the second, I have forums for them. Based on the amount of language they know. And the forum are usually a comment to a video that I post on the Sakai page, or to a reading, or just a question that I ask about how was your week, was it good, bad, why? So they get to write as well.
And as a side note to that, Carmela was also very cognizant of the fact that as she went up in difficulty and level from 101 to 132, she was less dependent on the written Italian and was kind of coercing them to more to use the spoken Italian, because that's what would happen in a physical classroom.
Yeah. And then we had a video chat, like I said, either one-on-one with the students or virtual group meetings when students get to practice the language in a more natural, real way. We add YouTube videos. Now, the YouTube videos required a lot of time for me because I had to, before I chose the right one, I had to look at about like 10, 20 of them to find the exact video that was not too stereotypical, where you only see Italian eating pasta and pizza. We're not just about that. It was not too, I mean, you see a lot of videos that present, oh, what do you do in Italy? You eat pasta and pizza, good. How about something else? Also, that could show exactly what the vocabulary we were going to study in the chapter, so introduce the vocabulary in a manner that the students could understand. So it took me a long time. But then eventually I picked the successful videos, and we're going to show you some of the videos that I picked. But my main concern was not to present Italians in a way that's too stereotypical, because that's nothing I try to do. Move away from there. We are more than pasta, pizza, and the bad stuff too that I'm not going to name. Then we created a mini-series with Rutgers PhD students. One of the actresses is right here in the room. And the idea was to create a storyline that went from 101 to 132, so that the students who are taking all the course online don't feel like she said, that 132 is completely off the chart. And I wrote the script, which wasn't too hard because the vocabulary is relatively simple. And we talked about a friendship that starts in 101 and then progresses all the way to 132. And what I was careful in choosing, I didn't choose just people who were native speakers I also chose 2 of our PhD students who have learned Italian here. So they're not native speakers, but they speak Italian fluently. And that's because I think the students can relate to them much more than someone like me who was fluent in Italian because was born in Italy. And so they can recognize that you can achieve fluency if you want to. And so we had 2 of them. And I liked it. We're going to show some of the episode, maybe not the one you're in, but it was fun. The process was fun to do, and the students, I'm teaching now 101, and I'm using the videos, and the students seem to appreciate it. Also because it's real Italian, we use slangs like in there, we use real words, and it's at a pace that demonstrates how Italians speak. So it's a little faster than what they hear in the textbook, but it's still manageable for them. And then each episode is followed by a comprehension exercise that goes up in difficulty. The first one is just check the box. What is Hiromi and Andrew saying? Are they saying that they're happy, sad, or whatever? Check the box. And then write a comment on the episode you just saw, or going up, it was like finish the dialogue between Andrew and Eilish, the 2 of the protagonists of the episode. And here we are with an example of the course.
The actual course.
Yeah, this is a course we designed, but I have now the opportunity to teach.
So this one was in Sakai, so you can do the same thing in any of the LMSs. Basically, this is the homepage for the course content, and this is the introductory video for the entire course. And can you explain a little bit why you chose this video?
Yeah, so as an introduction video, I always try to promote the language and also the country. So here I write on the bottom, oh, sorry, I went up. I didn't want to go up.
I don't know.
Okay, here, I write on the bottom, do you need a reason to visit Italy or to go back there a second time? Then I give you 43 great reasons. And this is a video that shows the Le 43 Meraviglie, the 43 most beautiful sites in Italy that you could visit. It doesn't really have Italian, it has a music in the background, but it shows you the sites and it shows you the region that this particular site is in, so the students get to see it. Sometimes I ask them to react to it, to comment on the video, which one they want to visit. Sometimes I just leave it as an introductory video to the Italian class and the Italian culture.
But right off the bat, she's creating a sort of emotional response to the language, right? It's not just the homepage with my syllabus and some static text. There's something to interact with. And so that already preparing the students emotionally to learn. So I'm going to jump into, I think it's chapter 8 has one of the videos. I call them the small novellas. Well, here's an example of how one of these modules is set up. So we can go into a whole bunch of stuff as to why these things are structured this way, but we'll leave that for a different session at a different conference. And in this case, the chapter's about traveling, right?
Yes.
And so she chose, of course, the Amalfi Coast and Capri. Who doesn't want to be there? What a great way to start a module. And then from there, she goes into vocabulary. She does rely on the textbook and some of the accompanying resources that the textbook provides, and the readings and the assessment, and then also a link to an outside is it a website or
soap opera.
Yeah, it's an Italian soap opera. So in case you need a little drama, a little spice in your life, you got that too. Of course, appropriate. Yes.
Oh yes.
And then
I think this is the video.
Yeah, we compare that to this other one again. This one's on vacation, and this one I loved because she told me why she chose this particular video, and I thought it was great. And
because when you take students in Italy for the first time, there is a shock. There is a cultural shock for many reasons. For the way Italians interact with each other, for the way Italians, the way they speak, also for the amount of history and art that you are exposed to. And one of the shocks that students have is also to discover that some of the food they thought was Italian is actually not Italian. So this is a girl traveling to Italy who keeps a diary of the things that shocked her the most. And then she makes this video. She's an American girl, so very close to the students, to our students. And she writes, she has a diary, and then she makes this YouTube video saying the 10 things that shocked her about Italy. And it's a fun video, it's engaging, and it's also true because everything she says, it happens in Italy. Even the delay, when it comes to delay with public transportation, she says it in a funny way, but it's the truth. Like sometimes you wait an hour and the bus comes and then it's full. So the students get to see what to expect in a fun way, and they get more engaged in the vocab. So that was the reason.
So the videos chosen don't necessarily focus on the vocabulary of the chapter, but they allude to it. Here's some more.
This is beautiful.
Oh, I'm looking for the video. Well, that's okay. We can go back here. All right, so that is what the site looks like. And here are some examples of those videos.
Oh, you're not in. Are you in? Oh, you are. Sorry. Do you want to stand up? Just when I say one thing, so she is the native speaker. She's actually here, she's hiding. And those are my two PhD students who are not native speakers, but they speak perfect Italian. So you can see that she has Italian speed more than that. So the students get every angle of the language.
And the characters, some of the characters were carried on through the entire mini-series, and some new characters were introduced along the way as well with different storylines. I'll talk more about that in a little bit.
This is released here?
Yes.
Yeah, so another shameless plug. TLT also has a video production team, and they helped produce these videos. Since these were done, the studio has been renovated and has been improved. So the sound quality, for example, will be better with newer productions. Carmela was able to achieve this because the School of Arts and Sciences did give her a stipend to develop this series of courses, and the budget included money for video production. But since then, I know TLT has made some upgrades or updates to how video production is offered to faculty, right? So maybe Joe can speak more about that a little bit later. So that was a 101 video. Here's the 102. We have some of the same characters, different setting, different vocabulary being used. Now, what would be funny is if Hiromi, for example, taught one of the courses that she's in. That would be kind of interesting.
It's going to happen.
Okay.
And that's why I wasn't in the competition.
So after this whole thing was said and done, a lot of more research has come out about digital storytelling. And digital storytelling in general is becoming a hot topic in instructional design and in teaching and learning. Basically, yeah, thank you. So digital storytelling is the idea of combining the long existing art of telling stories with any available variety of multimedia tools. Could be graphics, could be videos, could be web publishing. And I had the pleasure of attending the online learning conference in Orlando last year, and the keynote speaker was Matthew Lunn, who was one of the founders of Pixar. And his whole keynote was about storytelling. And it was really impactful was that he said stories are meaningful because they're memorable, impactful, and personal. So if any of you have seen any of these titles, did they resonate with you? One of these certainly did at some point, whether it was with you, with your kids, with your grandkids. And all of them resonated with you because they had a personal aspect. You were able to relate personally to at least some portion of the storyline, right? And his keynote was really interesting because he went into a lot of the backstory of how these movies were made. For example, when Nemo came out, at that point, the founding animators and producers of Pixar had all had their first children, and they were all boys. And they were all freaking out. They were the typical helicopter parents. They thought that the world was going to eat up their boys, chew them up and spit them out. Basically, that is the storyline of Nemo. Fast forward 15 years later, they had more kids, and one of them, who he says, you know, one of these guys is always happy, and they're like obnoxiously happy all the time, until his daughter turned to be a teenager, and then she got really sad, and that whole personal experience became the plot of Inside Out. So taking these personal experiences and communicating with your audience really makes for an impactful learning experience. There's a lot of research on how storytelling affects the brain. If you're able to see, for example, in these little mini-series, if the students are able to see the expressions on the people's faces as they speak, there's an emotional chemical response in the brain that makes for emotional learning. And we know from research that emotional learning turns into long-term learning a lot more than non-emotional or learning that's not linked to an emotion. I wish I had known a lot of this while working with Carmel, and if I could go back, I would rewrite the storyline a little bit more to follow some of Matthew Lund's tips about that going for the high point, the low point, the high point, the low point, and keeping people engaged. But it's doing a pretty good job the way it is. And I'll let Carmela share her observations with you.
Okay, so from the experience of using multimedia in my classes, which I'm doing this semester, that's what I've noticed so far in my students' response to this new way of teaching online. So the students seem to have a more enjoyable experience. I meet with them every 2 weeks, and I keep on asking them, how's the course working for you? Are you having fun? Are you learning? And they all seem to say yes. I mean, some of them say, it's okay. Some of them are very enthusiastic. You always get different response from different students, obviously. They are more comfortable with the language because they get to hear it more. Even though they're online, they hear my voice a lot, probably to a point that they're annoyed. They hear videos a lot, so they get more comfortable when I ask them to then record their little dialogue or their little skit. And the pronunciation is getting better because they get to hear real natural pronunciation through my video and through also the YouTube video. They show better writing skills. I have them writing since the first chapter, which is basically the second week of class. They started writing short sentences that then become 2, 3, and then eventually, I hope a paragraph. Let's see how we get to the end of the semester. And I'm grateful because Joe told me we have not much time left. And then in synthesis, I see that using multimedia, creating this emotional bond with the students has improved involvement, motivation, and student performance. I think we have one more.
Yeah, so just conclusions. So the multimedia approach works because of the way today's learners are used to receiving information. We got with those digital natives. They're used to having those images along with other information. We should use this knowledge to our advantage and present material in the medium our learners use the most to digest information. Multimedia does not replace the instructor, but it can help improve online teaching experiences and their learning. Incorporating multimedia can increase engagement and comprehension because people learn more when they can see the language being used. And effective storytelling enhances learning because it links concepts with emotions. And there's one short story to just piggyback off of that, because I know a lot of people said they were not language teachers. One of the other faculty that I worked with when I was still here at Rutgers was in the sciences, and it was a course on food waste. It was the first course on food waste ever offered here at Rutgers. And the two faculty members approached me and said, one of them said, I'm having a really hard time because there are these frameworks, some of them from the FDA, some of them from other government agencies, and I'm trying to make sense of it for the students. How do I present it to the students? And we realized she didn't have to. The students should make sense of it for themselves. And so we turned the entire food waste course into basically a story. And the story starts out, there is no answer to the food waste problem right now. What exists are these frameworks from this hodgepodge of research about what's going on in our country and other countries and how other countries are trying to solve it, but there is no set solution. You're going to try to come up with a solution based on the information we're going to present. So we made them the protagonists of the story, and then all the resources were the elements or the tools that they had to work with to come to some sort of conclusion. And their conclusions were presented to the governor of New Jersey as possible solutions to the food waste problem here in the state. So you can do this storytelling and multimedia engagement with any topic. It doesn't have to be language learning. It works really well with language learning, but it is applicable. Just takes a little bit of creativity. And you know who's really good for that? The instructional designers at TLT. All right, well, thank you very much.